Welcome to another episode of Learning for Truth and Love. I wanted to start this episode just by issuing an apology because I discovered after the fact that I went live on a private event, and I don't think people were expecting that would be a podcast. And so I guess just to give everyone an explanation of what happened, I'll tell you what the event is afterwards. But I used my software thinking that it would give everyone access. And when I made sure it was unlisted prior to the event, but what I discovered is when I launched the software again to go live, it made it public instead of keeping it as unlisted. So my apologies. And I guess I wasn't going to share this, but I will. So the last couple of weeks have been extremely challenging. I went through the process of seeing my uncle, who's really close to me, become ill and rapidly went downhill, and he passed. And so he was an uncle who was very close to me in so many ways. Not growing up with my dad, I had many uncles who, were father figures, and he was, he was, I would say, the biggest of those father figures. Um, he was there, when I got married. He was there for my graduation. Not just for major events, but he has contributed tremendously to my success today, and I'm truly grateful. And so the event was his funeral, that some relatives couldn't make it. And so this software, the nice thing I like about it is it allows the recording to be strong even when you have a poor internet connection from anywhere. And so I thought it'd be a great idea, not knowing that it was live streaming. So some of you after the event, I got to see that there are hundreds of people who had viewed, and I didn't realize it went public. But I hope that, yeah. So I know that during this time, many of you are having challenges, and as someone in academia, we're not used to, at least I'm not used to, we like to keep our private life private and the public life public. But I realize it is a reality for everyone. The things we're going through, the things that are happening at different times, especially now, and especially, given what's going on in our society. I think that the effects will be felt more by people who don't have the resources or the means to make things better. And so I thought I'd use this time to talk about that a bit and to address a couple things that have been on my heart and on my mind. And for the interest of being human, I suppose. I think sometimes it's very easy to get caught up in talking about ideas and forget about a human day-to-day interaction that bonds you and I. One of the things that's been on my heart recently a lot, because especially now that everything went public, and I'm talking about this now. I've been talking about cowardice. I've been thinking about, rather, cowardice. And I know that, many of us are religious from various religions. So cowardice has been on my mind for several reasons, mainly because I have a vision and I realize that I've been really slow to launch, and I really, I think it would benefit a great number of people. And I find myself being a little fearful, but I use thinking of word cowardice for a lot of reasons, mainly because of what's happening right now in our society. And so I wanted to really explore that a little bit, mostly because it's a journey that I've been thinking about quite a bit, I myself and others in society. And most of all, it's important for us as individuals and as a society to think about the impact. And I think one of the things that have been coming to mind is I keep remembering, and I know that people don't really like to, especially intellectuals, talk about the Bible, even though many use it to guide what they say. And I can tell by listening to some people who are talking that this is where they're drawing their inspiration, mostly because I've read it in two ways, both as a spiritual text and as an intellectual text. And I think it also, because I look at it from both perspectives, sometimes it makes it difficult to hear what others are saying about it. one of the things that had always puzzled me for years is seeing how what may seem harsh, the Bible talks about cowardly. And I always wonder, well, why is it treats cowards so much more harshly, especially, because a lot of times, and I think at a time I was thinking of, sometimes interchanging cowardice and fear. But to bear with me in mind, let's explore these ideas about what it means to, be cowardly versus fear. And so I'm looking up the dictionary definitions, and according to the Oxford Languages, in the Google search, a coward is a person who lacks the courage to do or endure dangerous or unpleasant things, right? And so excessively afraid of danger or pain. Okay, and so we think to ourselves, well, that's not exactly unreasonable, is it? To be afraid of danger or pain, except it's been coming up quite a bit, especially when that fear of danger or pain, partly emotional pain from speaking or speaking out or speaking the truth is wreaking havoc right now. If we compare it to fear, fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or threat. So here you have this unpleasant emotion, right? Which many of us do have. I mean, I have fear all the time. I can't tell you how much fear I've had launching this podcast. But that fear, I realize, can translate later into cowardice if I allow it to define me, and especially if it comes to dealing with something important. Now, let's look up what the Bible talks about cowardly, because I always thought, like, why is it ranked? Why is it in kind of the same category as some things that we might consider really bad? Why is this considered bad? And I was thinking specifically about that scripture in Revelations where the cowardly is talked about synonymously with other people. And so let me pull this up here on the internet. In Revelations chapter 21, verse 8, it says, "But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is a second death." And so I always thought it was interesting, that cowardly and lying were ranked in the same area as murderers and those who were and sexually immoral. And I always wondered why. And I think, because of, in light of things that have been happening, perhaps it's shed a little bit more clarity on just how severe being cowardly is. Let me see. I'm curious about what else it talks about cowardice. Let's see if I can find some others. Okay. Here's another one where in Acts 27:30 it says, "In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow." Wait a second. What does this have to do with cowardly? Hold on a second. You have to see what's happening in the whole thing. So they're talking about a shipwreck. And so what does it have to do with cowardly, and why did someone classify it as cowardly? On the 14th night, we were still being driven from the Adriatic Sea. When about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. That sounds like science there in the Bible. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away. Just before dawn, urged them all to eat. Okay. So I think I have a better idea. So cowardice can literally cause others to die, and have a direct impact and others dying. So cowardice can lead to so many big things. So there's so many examples, biblical examples, where, you know, we see act of courage and an act of cowardice. And then the consequences for many is either somebody dies, somebody suffers. So cowardice has really large consequences that requires courage. But now that I've mentioned and looked into courage and distinguished between fear and cowardice, let's talk about courage, right? Let's talk about what to do and what to be. Courage is the ability to do something that frightens one. Strength in the face of pain or grief. Wow. Strength in the face of pain or grief. I guess we always have to ask whether our acts of courage or acts of cowardice is leading to physical pain, emotional pain. I think what's interesting is, especially when it comes to our roles in society, especially when we don't connect directly with the people we're supposed to be working with or people we're supposed to be serving, we don't often see the direct connection between our lack of courage or sometimes even our courage, because we don't often see the direct impact of things that are positive as well. And certainly many don't see the direct impact that cowardice or lack of courage is having on us. I think that, what an amazing way to connect the social and emotional learning by helping our children, our students to understand what is an appropriate measure of courage, and based on their level, where they are, their age group, what they will deal with and what they're responsible for is completely different from what others are responsible for or might deal with. So, and one of the things I've been working on and really seeking to understand is, what does it mean to bring myself to the table, especially in the classroom? And I know several have been seeking to understand, what does it mean to bring oneself in a way that's authentic, appropriate, and makes connections in meaningful ways. One of the ways this shows up in my life as well is just, when when someone dies, it always leaves us with the guilt of not being there as much as we can, as much as we should or hope we should, because we've made other choices. And when I say other choices, meaning, we say, oh, we continue to live our life and doing things and all that. But sometimes being there for others does take an act of courage, because instead of thinking about the discomfort in ourselves, okay, or the inconvenience, and this is where it comes off, because these days it doesn't have to be something big, something tiny as in being inconvenienced can lead to acts of cowardice rather than acts of courage. Like in those moments, where, for example, you or I are thinking of someone, and it's happened, and yeah, it's, in many cases coincidental, but sometimes those people are on our hearts and our minds for a reason, and we have to listen to those voices. I listen to, one of the things that have driven my work is listening to those voices, and those feelings and what it's telling you, the choices it's telling you to make. It's one of the things that led me to even start to write the children's books that I did. I had an experience sitting and watching something that, when I thought about the impact on children, it was painful, honestly. And more specifically, I'm telling you and speaking in codes. So I was looking at a movie and realizing how, or I should say, our absence, not necessarily our portrayal. And then I was thinking of the impact it would have on our children's self-concept. And I started to cry. It was painful to think about. But then I realized the next thought that crossed my mind is, I'm going to write those books and I want our children to read. And then the other thought was, nobody's going to publish this. And I really, because, it's not the thinking that went into what I wanted to portray was different. And so I decided I would take a risk and I would publish it myself, whether or not anyone bought it. Even if it could help 10 people, 1, 2, 3. For me, in my mind, it was still worth it. And so, but it meant putting myself out there. It meant, and that was the part that has held me back for years, not wanting to go public, not wanting to engage with public, because we don't know. There's an unknown, there's a fear of putting yourself out there and not knowing what the response will be, whether or not you'll be embraced or rejected. But at the end of the day, what drives me is thinking, if this reaches 1, 2 of the people it's supposed to, then it would have been worth it. But again, I want to end this briefly by saying my apologies to those who found that live link. I will certainly take more care. It was close family and friends who had gathered, and hopefully you turned it off right away if it impacted you in any way negatively. And that's something that's not a conversation, not a topic for not a conversation, teaching our students, our kids, how to turn things off when they're not for us inappropriate. But thank you very much for taking this time to listen. And I'm excited about upcoming episodes and sharing upcoming work.